Good morning, committee, members of the committee. Happy Valentine's Day. Members of the public and those joining us online, good morning. Mr. Caldwell, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and if you would call the roll.
Representative Klauston. Here. Representative Guggenmoss.
Here.
Representative Heft. Representative McCann. Here. Representative Ottman.
Here.
Representative Stivar. Representative Wasserberger. Here. Representative Yen. Chairman Rodriguez-Williams. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. All right, well, welcome everybody. I'll go through the rules really quickly. There's a sheet out front of the meeting room for those that like to read them themselves. Members of the committee, remember to keep your cell phones on silent. Comments from the public will be directed to the issue under discussion by the committee. Distracting comments on unrelated side issues are out of order. Speakers will avoid personal criticism, ridicule, or name-calling directed at anyone else in attendance at the meeting. This includes comments of a personal nature directed at other speakers, audience members, or members. For audience members, we expect you will refrain from any behavior that disrupts the orderly conduct of the meeting. Specifically, the rules prohibit speaking out loud when another member is talking, carrying on loud and distracting side conversations, any shouting, clapping, booing in response to the speaker's comments. Our guidelines are very simple. We just ask that everyone conducts themselves in a civil and respectable manner at all times during the meeting. This morning, committee, we have two bills on the agenda. We have Senate File 75, and then we have Senate File 130. So I will move Senate File 75 and place it on the table for the committee's consideration. This bill is titled Coroner Investigations, Disposition of Decedent's Property, sponsored by Senator Case. Welcome, Senator Case. We're dying to hear more about your bill. Please come forward and walk us through it.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Very happy to be here. I believe there are a couple of clerk of district courts that will be available to testify on this. I think they're online. Madam Chairwoman, what this bill does is to provide for the disposition of property that is found on a decedent when there's no next of kin. And that does happen quite often. It's usually not, what I've found is if you die and you've got money, you suddenly have lots of relatives, but if you have nothing, that's when these are really indigents for the most part. It might be people that are found dead in a vehicle, that happens. But the current law requires that the clerk of court deal with that property. But they actually don't do that. They don't do that. They don't have anything to do with that. But the law says that they do. The coroner is the office that handles the personal effects, the body, all of that. So what this bill does is to kind of move that obligation for the property out of the clerk of court's realm into the coroner's realm. And there wasn't a lot of framework on that previously. The bill adds more framework about the value of the property and notification and stuff like that. And that's absolutely fine, Madam Chairwoman. But the basic purpose of the bill is to take a responsibility that the clerk of court does not do. They don't do this and put it where the people that actually do this. And I think if by way of history, Madam Chairman, our clerks of court are a constitutional office. They're actually in the Wyoming Constitution. At one time, they have a very important role. I don't mean this would sound wrong, but they actually were the representative of the courts out in the state. And they had this higher role at the time, so they they even held proceedings, you know, and would, so that office is kind of involved, and maybe that was a natural place for that to be in those times. Times are a little bit different now, and we have coroners in all our counties, which is a statutory office, by the way. So this is the bill. It was amended in the Senate Judiciary Committee. They added a time frame of 180 days, and they talked about what the proceeds, they added in excess of $50. And they deleted where it went, and instead of going to the general fund, they put to the custody of the state treasurer under the Uniform Unclaimed Property Acts. So you all have the engrossed bill, and it just did all the new language, and the deals are on page 2, Madam Chairwoman. Just says, now the coroner shall, and then there is a comma added on page 1, within a reasonable time after completing the investigation, turn over to the appointed personal representatives of the estate or the deceased, or if none, the coroner, it used to be, they turned it over to the clerk of the district court of the county. But now the coroner shall dispose of all money or other property found upon the body of the deceased in accordance with subsection C of this section. Subsection C says, if there is no personal representative of the state, and if the deceased next of kin does not claim the money and property found upon the body of the deceased within 180 days, the coroner shall cause the property to be sold at a public auction to the highest bidder, or, this is important, or by any other means of sale adopted by the county in which the investigation occurs. The reason is it felt it wasn't really practical to hold an auction in small situations, and that would just be very burdensome. All money and any proceeds from the sale or auction of the property shall first be used to pay the expenses of the burial in accordance with subsection A of this section. Any remaining money and proceeds in excess of $50 shall be deposited and placed in the custody of the state treasurer under the Uniform Unclaimed Property Act. It's effective July 1. That's the bill.
Thank you, Senator. Committee, any questions of the bill sponsor? Representative Clouston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator, for being here and bringing this. So tell me a little bit about the Uniform Unclaimed Property Act. So the money's going to go sit in an account. How long does it sit there? Does it sit there indefinitely? And then is there interest earned on that? Just a little bit more information on, is that the right place? And what are the long-term effects of that money sitting in there?
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. The unclaimed property account is an account established by the state of Wyoming. It's under the auspices of the state treasurer, and it is the receiving place for any monies that are determined to be abandoned or found where the owner cannot be located. And so the major source of funds in the unclaimed property account are bank accounts. And you have people that forget they have a bank account. And it goes back to, maybe you had one and for years you didn't pay attention to this bank account. Maybe you moved and the knowledge is not getting to you. So eventually the bank can provide notice and they turn the money over to the state of Wyoming, and it's held in this account. It's held in perpetuity for your benefit. And if you or your heirs can establish a claim to those funds, and there's other property too, it's actually got some real property, but the funds, then the funds are turned over to you. During the entire time, the financials, the money is invested and there is interest earned, but the state of Wyoming keeps the interest. They don't provide interest to the claimant. And adding the unclaimed property account was a Judiciary Committee move in the Senate. So I'm okay with it, but it's a big moneymaker for the state, actually, you guys. And it kind of encourages banks to move accounts over to unclaimed property then it gets them from having to fool with these little accounts. And anyway, that's the account that we're talking about, Madam Chairwoman.
Further questions for the bill sponsor? Okay. I
Thought I
have,
heard somebody come in, I'm sorry.
no, I have two for you.
I think this is a clerk too, Madam Chairwoman.
Yeah, so, just curious, I mean, what was the genesis of this bill? Obviously, this process has been going on for a long time, just curious what prompted the change in statute? And then second part, was there any discussion in your chamber about, when you talk about real property, I'm thinking, if there's a dog or horse or other livestock and what that looks like?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't know the answer with respect to an animal. I mean, in all these cases, these are elected officials with an obligation, and I'm sure the animals are well cared for, and I can only speculate. But the genesis of the bill was I was approached by my Clerk of District Court, Amanda Sanchez, and I think she's available to testify online today. And I think we have another Clerk of Court here today. But they don't actually do this. And it hasn't been done this way, as far as anybody knows, kind of forever. And this kind of will put things more in line with how it's actually done. And there was no framework about days or contacting next of kin or anything. Statute was what you see here in the unchanged part. So in a way, I feel like this at least kind of provides a little better framework. And I see that there's a proposed amendment from Representative Yen. I think that sounds good too. But with respect to the animals, I guarantee you, I know how our coroner works. It's heartbreaking to have to work, they're good people and they want to do the right thing. There's just no question about that. And if there is animals or things, they'll do good. They're good Wyoming people and they'll do what they can. If animals need care, they'll find care. But we didn't talk about animals specifically, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Senator. Any additional questions from the committee? The bill sponsor. Seeing none, we will move on to public comment on your
Okay.
bill.
And Madam Chairwoman,
Yes.
I'm chairing a meeting across the hall. I think this is a good bill, and I don't see lots of controversy. And I see Representative Yen provided me a copy of his proposed amendment. I don't know if the clerks have seen that, the clerk of courts, but with your leave, I would excuse myself to go back across the hall.
Sure, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks for
I know I'm in
joining us
good
this
hands.
morning.
Thank you, guys. I believe this is the clerk here.
I am not a clerk.
They're online, I hope.
All right, so we're opening up to public comment. Is there any government agencies, public officials? Anybody that would like to testify in the audience here? Okay, we will move on to Zoom, and it looks like we have somebody joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can. Please state your name and who you're with and your take on the bill, and we'll hear your testimony.
I am Amanda Sanchez. I'm the clerk of district court in Fremont County. And I resonate with Senator Case's sentiments about this bill. A little bit of history. We did bring this bill as the clerk of district courts with a lot of thought and forethought that went into it. So we worked with the Coroners Association knowing that this is an old statutory requirement that when there was an unclaimed body, parties would bring, or the coroner would bring, if it was over $50 in value upon a deceased person, that property to our office, and then we just held on to it. So kind of the thought and theory behind this is that some of the clerks still have just items hanging around their office because there was no way to actually move that property on. besides just sitting there. After the full estate plan had gone, after notices from the coroner would go in to effect stating, there's an unclaimed person. If you would like to claim these belongings, please come to us and then we can address that appropriately. With respect to the concern about animals, to be honest, we've never had an animal that I'm aware of in any of the clerk's offices be brought to us. Other items that have been brought recently, earbuds, guitars, trucks, those type of things. So it's more of a physical property like jewelry, any loose change that would have accumulated over that $50 gap would go to our office, and then it just kind of accumulates there. So the hopes of this bill would to place the onus into the corners of saying, hey, we got this property, we've done our due diligence. Now, is there a way that we can actually move this into something such as the unclaimed fund so that people can claim it if they need to, or it's available for that, and then moves this property from just sitting with the county, and there's a care and a due diligence that needs to be taken to hold these items. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Committee, do you have any questions for Amanda Sanchez? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony this morning.
Thank you.
Mr. Caldwell, are there any others? No, ma'am. Okay, seeing nobody else online, we will close public comments. Committee, what is your pleasure on the bill? Okay, the bill's been moved by Representative Guggemos, seconded by Representative McCann. Discussion and amendments. Representative Yin.
Madam Chairman, I'm going to move my proposed amendment that I handed out to all of you in LSO, and I sent it to the clerks. I also sent it to Senator Case. With a second, I'll talk about it more.
Okay, so the amendment's been moved and seconded by Representative Wasserberger. Discussion on the amendment.
Madam Chairman.
Representative Yin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So this actually came to me from the Chief Executive's office. They wanted to make sure that there was no hidden liability because, I mean, it's going to go into the state's care when it goes into the unclaimed office. And they wanted to make sure that there's at least a good faith effort to find who might be the rightful owner before it goes there. So that's all it does.
Thank you, Representative Yin. Discussion on the amendment. Representative Clouston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have a definition of good faith effort? Do we know how that's defined? Is it found anywhere else?
Representative Yin.
Madam Chairman, I don't know the answer to that, sorry. But we definitely have good faith effort in statute, more than this one time, though.
Further discussion on the amendment. Okay, seeing none, sensing the urge to vote with a voice vote and your hand raised. All those in favor of Representative Yin's amendment, state aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, the amendment has passed. Further amendments, further discussion on the bill. Question being called. Mr. Caldwell, if you'd call the roll.
This is a roll call vote for Senate Bill 75 as amended. Representative Clouston.
Aye.
Representative Guggemos. Representative Heft. Representative McCann. Representative Ottman.
Aye.
Representative Stivar. Representative Wasserberger. Representative Yin.
Aye.
Chairman Rodriguez Williams. Madam Chairman, that is 8 aye and 1 excused.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. So Senate File 75 has passed committee. We will let Senator Case know. And if somebody can work with him to carry the bill on the floor, that would be appreciated. We'll now move House Bill 130 on the table for consideration. This bill, again, is titled Emergency Assistance Immunity Mental Health Services, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss. Good morning, Senator. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Good morning, committee. Appreciate the time to bring you Senate File 130, Emergency Assistance Immunity, Mental Health Services. This is a short and sweet bill. It goes into our Good Samaritan legislation. You see on page 1 going on to page 2, where we provide Good Samaritans that are providing emergency health care interventions with some legal protections to make sure that our Good Samaritans feel comfortable that they can actually try and help somebody in an emergent situation without ending up in a lawsuit for failing to render effective services. That statute, as you can see, didn't have any specific reference providing for that same type of Good Samaritan protection for mental health related crises. So this simply adds that language to ensure that if somebody has been participating in the governor's program, for example, to learn mental health first aid, that they would be covered in a circumstance where they tried to provide their best efforts in a Good Samaritan capacity to protect somebody who might be suicidal or experiencing a mental health crisis, and make it clear that the legislation would cover that same type of Good Samaritan effort as it does for traditional health care. So honestly, it may be interpreted right now as already covering it. That would be possible, but there is no clarity to that extent, and this provides that clarity. The language is simply a series of conforming amendments in the Good Samaritan statute that you can see, where we're adding including assistance for a mental health crisis or mental health crisis several times. And then the bottom of page 2 is a little more extensive, including mental health services or services provided during a suicidal intervention. This was requested by the mental health care community, so I have Lindsay here to speak in a little more detail about their interests, and fortunately has been opposed seemingly by no one, which is always good for a bill. And hopefully we'll see no concerns. But I'll pause there, Madam Chairman, and let Lindsay speak.
Thank you, Senator. Ma'am, please state your name and we'll hear your.
Absolutely. Madam Chairwoman, Lindsay Simino with the Wyoming Behavioral Health Alliance. As the good senator has said, over the last few years, Governor Gordon has prioritized mental health statewide and encouraged really mental health access for all of Wyoming citizens. Part of that initiative has been through peer support and peer support programs at law enforcement, at community centers, and at faith-based organizations across the state. Through the governor's behavioral health workforce task force, what we realized was that these peer support groups did not have that coverage explicitly in statute to protect them from this liability if they did interact with somebody who was experiencing suicidal ideation. And then that was also then in turn leading to people inappropriately going to the emergency room, which, as you know, our healthcare system doesn't need any extra burdens. And so in order to really give our law enforcement programs and our faith-based programs that coverage they need from that liability, we felt like this language was necessary. And so we brought it forward, and like the good senator has said, so far there's been no opposition. And with that, I will stand for question.
Thank you. Committee, any questions for the bill sponsor or co-sponsor? Representative McCann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, has this been a problem? Has there been issues with people quote unquote getting in trouble for trying to help? I'm just curious.
Senator?
I yield to Lindsay, who's more experienced.
Okay. Miss-
Madam Chairwoman, Representative McCain, what we have seen, not so much necessarily people getting in trouble as much as the fear of getting in trouble, the fear of litigation has deterred people both from being trained as well as starting these programs within their faith-based churches, organizations, and police force. And so it's been a deterrent from getting community members to engage in this training. And then we have seen what we would call an inappropriate referral to EDs, to emergency departments in certain communities. And so we're hoping that this language will incentivize those who may be hesitant to come forward and engage in those trainings.
Further questions for the committee? Representative Wasserberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Lindsay, for coming and sharing your testifying on this bill today. I'm just curious if you could, I'm just trying to think of an example because this is something that I haven't really been too heavily involved with. What type of mental health crises occur that people are sitting there getting kind of iffy about whether or not if they should seek help? I could, just being in our younger days, I can remember people telling me that they were at parties and somebody maybe overdosed and they're afraid of contacting a hospital. Does that relate anything to this, or?
Ms. Semino.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Wasserberger, actually, that is a separate bill that you will probably see next week as far as partying and a drug overdose. And it is confusing because that bill has been also classified under the Good Samaritan law, and it's actually a different statute for that specific bill. This one is strictly our Good Samaritan law. And as far as a mental health crisis, it really does directly correlate with suicidal ideation, and really the scale of suicidal ideation. The reality is when you're looking at a clinical standpoint, everyone experiences some level of suicide ideation. For example, when the alarm went off this morning, all of us on some level probably had some preferences of whether or not to get up. We call that passive suicidality. For those who are not clinically or professionally trained, that still causes a lot of anxiety of, is this a significant situation that needs to be addressed with a Title 25? Or is this something that is within my capacity to intervene and allow this person to stay home? Because inpatient intervention can be traumatic. And so it's really giving them the leeway to do what they're trained to do. But no, that specific situation that you're referring to, I will be back to discuss with you all next week. So it'll be a good time.
Further questions for the bill sponsor? Follow-up, Representative Wasserberger.
Okay, so I'm still trying to understand this. I'm really sorry, Lindsay. So is this, this would relate to somebody that maybe is trying to attempt suicide, and so somebody that is trying to respond is a little bit iffy about contacting a hospital or trying to refrain them from killing themselves? I don't know, yeah.
Ms. Semino.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Wasserberger, I will use a situation without identifying information that I have heard statewide, if that helps. A lot of churches engage in a program called Celebrate Recovery, where they are helping their church members in their walks of sobriety and through their walks of addiction. It is a peer support led group. Many times it's either led by somebody who is from a history of addiction, or it's led by the pastor of that congregation themselves. If somebody within that group who's struggling with addiction says passively, I don't want to be here anymore, right now that pastor is confused on whether that one sentence requires him to call law enforcement and start a Title 25, or if he has the ability to de-escalate the situation and prevent that liability for him and his congregation as well. And so what we believe from the task force is that peer support group, they have that de-escalation as well as those referral sources if they do feel unequipped to handle that mental health crisis. And this just gives them the power and the tools to do that.
Senator.
And one more follow-up, Madam Chairman, on that. Law enforcement is supportive of this. They have peer support groups as well, and you can imagine PTSD type circumstances where they support each other and are interested in having the clarity as well that when they're providing that support, there's no legal liability if they don't have perfect judgment in those engagements as well.
Vice Chair Almond.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Semino and Senator Rothfuss, good morning. Just a point of clarity for myself. I see in here that it's mentioned quite a few times, training So is this like with CPR, if you have the training, you're more likely to assist in certain things? So does this only cover if you have in fact gone through a training to assist?
Ms. Semino.
Madam Chairwoman, Vice Chair, this will cover anybody who is considered a layperson. Therefore, it will not cover me, as I am officially licensed in providing a service and am a professional with a professional judgment. However, anybody who's interacting with anybody struggling with suicidality and suicide ideation will be able to be covered from that liability if they are showing up to the situation with good intent.
Follow up, Vice Chair Ottman?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So just to reiterate, okay, so the general public, okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Representative McCann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ma'am, would this also include physical restraint?
Ms. Semino.
Madam Chairwoman, I will be very honest with you. I have no idea. For the purpose of the language, it is just suicidal ideation. And as far as the physical restraint piece, I really can't speak to that.
Madam Chairman,
Senator.
I would say probably not. I think that's a pretty significant extension from the idea of Good Samaritan protection to restraint when, I wouldn't anticipate that.
Thank you. Further questions from the committee? Follow up, Representative McCann.
The scenario that crossed my mind, Madam Chair, sorry. Yeah. If this was one of my Army buddies or a family member, you can bet your butt I'm gonna restrain them if they think they're gonna do it. So it just kind of popped into my mind. Does that, I mean, is that person gonna be able to come back and you kept me from doing what I wanted to do? So I'm just wondering. Thank
Ms.
you.
Semino.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative, what I can say is that in any situation, and granted, this is speculation, but in any situation where a suicidal ideation has escalated to the point that a restraint is necessary, law enforcement and ambulatory services, more than likely at that point, are going to be involved or on their way. As far as the liability of you stopped me from doing what I wanted to do, that is a different issue entirely. This is more of if a suicide is completed, that protects you from that liability. I have found professionally, when I have had to conduct a Title 2025, that in the moment, there might be resentment. I've always had a client return and be grateful, and so.
Additional questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you both. Don't go far unless you have to. All right. So is there anybody that would like to testify? We'll open it up to public comment. It's a quiet morning in this committee. Public comment on Senate File 130. Is there anybody online? Nope. Okay, seeing nobody online, we will close public comment on Senate File 130. Committee, what is your pleasure? Second. The bill's been moved by Representative McCann and seconded by Representative Wasserberger. Discussion and amendments. Representative Heft.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This looks like a pretty straightforward bill. I'm not seeing anything here that's going to be a problem. I don't see any need for any amendments. I would vote on the bill.
Further discussion on the bill or amendments? Question being called by Representative Yen. Mr. Caldwell, if you call the roll on Senate File 130.
This is a roll call vote for Senate File 130. Representative Clausen.
Aye.
Representative Guggenmoss,
Aye.
Representative Heft, Representative McCann, Representative Ottman,
Aye.
Representative Stivar, Representative Wasserberger, Representative Yen,
Aye.
Chairman Rodriguez Williams. Madam Chairman, that is 8 aye and 1 excused.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Senator Rothfuss, if you'd work with a committee member or another House member to carry your bill, that would be great.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, I appreciate it. Thank you, Committee Leader Yin, would you take it?
I'm happy to take it.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
for joining us this morning. Committee, that concludes all the bills on our agenda. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.